offered a mystical and metaphysical exploration of the Magi and what they bring to the Christmas story, recognizing that it's not what we know about the Magi historically that makes them so intriguing, it's who they became or have become in our imaginations. Which we noted is something that's actually true about all aspects of the Christmas story, or in fact, any story that we seek to find ourselves in, as we strive to attain greater understanding of ourselves and our life journeys. Finding ourselves in stories is what metaphysics is all about, engaging our imaginations, the open, receptive, intuitive aspect of our minds that offers new perspectives to our rational, deductive, sometimes stuck aspect of mind, and thus enables us, in Fillmore's words, to receive divine ideas and reflect their character into our consciousness. Which is why stories, parables, tales, allegories, movies, plays, etc. are often a better source of spiritual truth than seemingly factual treatises, as they naturally engage our imagination without us becoming distracted with questions of the material authenticity. For example, did this really happen? Did it really happen this way? And often in those questions, missing the essence of the story. Last week, I shared Fillmore's perspective that the Magi from the East represent the inner wisdom that we carry within our souls from previous incarnations. Now that could refer to incarnations in this lifetime. I mean, how many of us feel like we've lived multiple lives in this one lifetime? Or if you believe in reincarnation, it could include other lifetimes. Or it could even involve just tapping into the collective consciousness where we can gather the wisdom from multiple lifetimes that weren't necessarily our own. This inner wisdom doesn't provide specific factual knowledge, however, but rather serves as a subjective and not fully understood guiding light, much like the star that led the Magi in the Christmas story. In essence, it awakens our intuition. Historically, the Magi were individuals who were learned in both the physical and metaphysical realms, like astronomy and astrology, who were held in high esteem for their spiritual wisdom and sought out for guidance. Which brought to my mind, as I shared last week, the fictional characters of Gandalf from The Lord of the Rings and Dumbledore of Harry Potter as modern-day references for what we might think of as Magi. And again, the fact that they're fictional actually helps us listen to their whether they actually lived or actually pronounced those things, like Lao Tzu. You know, many say that Lao Tzu didn't actually exist, and yet we have the Tao. So that consciousness existed, whether in one individual or many. And that brings us to today's lesson, the focus of which is actually slightly different from my original plan, because I had planned to reflect on some real individuals that I consider to be modern-day Magi or wise ones, specifically Mr. Rogers. And that's a lesson I'm postponing to the 1st of March. Because this last week, Karen and I attended the London, Broadway, now San Francisco, 2-part play, Harry Potter and the Cursed Child. It's literally an all-day experience. There's a matinee that goes from 2 to 5:30, and then a second play that goes from 7:30 to 10:30. So it's like being immersed in theater and in the story. And I literally sat there and thought many times, now there's an example of the Magi lesson that I was talking about last week. And so as Denise had begun preparing for Mr. Rogers, I said, I think I'm going to shift things a little bit here and talk a little bit about the play. Of course, this week has been amazing because the next day I went to Hamilton again. So I'm just sort of shows out and trying to embrace it all. So how many of you are not familiar with the Harry Potter series? Oh, good. Just a couple. Okay. And how many have not heard of Professor Dumbledore? All right. So I ask you to trust me that if you haven't heard of it, and the rest of you can just agree with me, that Dumbledore is a perfect example of the mystical, magical, yet still seeking Magi consciousness, who at once is flawed and wise. Some of my favorite Dumbledore insights that reveal this wisdom and his limitations come from the King's Cross station scene near the end of Book 7, just before the final battle. And those of you remember who have read it, without going too deep into the alternate mythical world of Harry Potter, Harry has realized that he's connected to Voldemort, the villain who shall not be named, and Harry has accepted the inevitability and necessity that he has to die in order for Voldemort to be destroyed. And so Harry, who's now like a 15-year-old boy, walks into the Forbidden Forest and allows Voldemort to strike him with a killing curse, after which he wakes up in a dimension beyond life, or perhaps a dimension of shared consciousness, to discover the spirit of Dumbledore, who had died a year or two before, in a setting that appropriately appears to Harry as King's Cross train station. Here, representing the cross between the world of the living and the world of the dead, just like the real station is the pathway between the world of magic and the world of muggles for Harry. Well, after first clarifying that Dumbledore is indeed dead, Harry asks if he, Harry, is also dead, to which Dumbledore replies, "That is the question, isn't it? On the whole, dear boy, I think not." Confused, Harry continues, "But I should have died. I didn't defend myself. I meant to let him kill me." And Dumbledore, radiating happiness, responds, "And that will, I think, have made all the difference." Harry then asks, "So the part of his soul that was in me, has it gone?" And Dumbledore enthusiastically assures him, "Oh yes, yes, you brave, brave boy, he destroyed it. Your soul is whole and completely your own, Harry." Well, Harry continues asking questions, and rather than answering them like a true Magi, Dumbledore continues to invite Harry to answer his questions from his, ultimately revealing to the reader that Harry hadn't died because, in short, he was still being protected by his mother's love, she having given her life to save Harry's life. Dumbledore then offers an insightful observation about Voldemort. He said, "Voldemort's knowledge remains woefully incomplete, Harry. That which Voldemort does not value, he takes no trouble to comprehend. Of house elves and children's tales, of love, loyalty, and innocence, Voldemort knows and understands nothing. They that have all the power beyond his own, a power beyond the reach of any magic, is a truth he has never grasped." So the two continue talking, with Dumbledore confessing to his own human faults and weaknesses and failings, and asking Harry's forgiveness for keeping secrets from him, and not trusting that Harry was a better and stronger man than Dumbledore had been. And then they grew quiet. And the realization of what would happen next began to settle gradually over Harry. And so he asked, "I've got to go back, haven't I?" But Dumbledore responds, "That is up to you." But after a bit of further discussion, Dumbledore confirms that if Harry does decide to return, that there is a chance that Voldemort may be finished for good. And so, realizing that leaving this place would not be nearly as hard as walking into the forest had been, even as he knew that he was heading back to pain and the fear of more loss, Harry decides he must return to the battle. But first, he turns and asks Dumbledore, "Tell me one last thing. Is this real? Or has this been happening inside my head?" And here's my favorite Dumbledore quote. Dumbledore, beaming at him even as his figure began to fade, replies, "Of course it's happening inside your head, Harry. But why on earth should that mean it's not real?" The entire scene embodies the Magi consciousness within Dumbledore, the intelligence, the insight, the confidence, and ultimately the humility and wisdom that comes from growing self-awareness cultivated through difficult life lessons. It also demonstrates Dumbledore's awareness that the truth lives within each of us, and thus, as a teacher, you don't need to put it into your students, but draw it out of them. Awaken that intuition that's natural in each of us, just as the star awakened the intuition within the Magi's. But most importantly, it made clear that for all of his wisdom, like the Magi, Dumbledore is still a seeker on a journey with human faults and fears and failings, which are, of course, also the conditions that create opportunities for further growth, for greater self-awareness, and for increasing wisdom. In Harry Potter and the Cursed Child, which is the continuation of the story, Dumbledore's fears and failings provide a backdrop for Harry's now adult challenges. Fearing for the safety of his son, Albus, and questioning his own ability as a parent, Harry's relieved to see the old headmaster appear in the portrait in Harry's office. He tells Dumbledore he's missed him and he needs his help and his advice. And Dumbledore responds, "You ask me, of all people, how to protect a boy in terrible danger? We cannot protect the young from pain or harm. It will always come." He then tells Harry that perhaps his love for Albus had blinded him, which is Dumbledore's own experience and limitation with love. But then he retreats, abandoning Harry once again in his time of need, incapable of offering even a sounding board, because though Dumbledore knows of love's power, he too is still afraid to fully embrace it in his life. Time progresses, and the situation grows graver, and the threat of dark power again rears its ugly head in the Harry Potter world, with Harry's son Albus in the middle of it all. And Dumbledore appears again in the portrait in Harry's office, but this time Harry is angry at his mentor and tells him so, saying, "Love blinds us? Do you even know what that means? Do you even know how bad that advice was? My son is now fighting battles for us just as I had to fight for you. And I have proved to be as bad a father to him as you were to me." Dumbledore confesses that he had failed Harry, that he had been afraid to admit his love when Harry was a child, because he believed himself, even now, unfit to love. Because where he loved, he caused irreparable damage in his mind. Harry tells him it would have hurt much less if Dumbledore had just told him that when he was a child. And Dumbledore says, "I was blind. That's what love does. I couldn't see that you needed to hear this, that this closed-up, tricky, dangerous old man loved you." The two men were overcome with emotion as the truth, finally spoken, begins to relieve and heal their wounds. And then Dumbledore, in his new self-realization, says, "Harry, there is never a perfect answer in this messy, emotional world. Perfection is beyond the reach of humankind, beyond the reach of magic. In every shining moment of happiness is that drop of poison, the knowledge that pain will come again. Be honest to those you love. Show your pain. To suffer is as human as to breathe." And then he turns to go, and Harry says, "Don't go." To which Dumbledore responds, "Those that we love never truly leave us, Harry. There are things that death cannot touch, pain and memory and doubt." Harry replies, "I love you too, Dumbledore." And the old man says, "I know," and departs. Last week, I spoke to the idea that we would all like to come to our spiritual journey like the shepherds did in the Christmas story, with angelic revelation, with joy and proclamations, or as I shared, with a burning bush, right? If we want something that is so clear that we don't even have to question. Likewise, I think we would also prefer our magi, our teachers, our wise ones to be infallible, right? So we could fully trust their judgment. We could feel safe. We could rely on their faith rather than having to develop our own or trust our own judgment or trust the Spirit within us. But sadly, that would defeat the purpose of our journey. Others can be guiding lights for us, pointing us in the direction of truth, but they can't walk our path for us. After all, they have their hands full figuring out their own lessons and teaching very often, as I say, what they most need to learn. Teachers aren't people that have it all figured out, but they're willing to share the journey so that hopefully others can step into their own journeys. I remember how hard it was to learn that Rory and my spiritual mentors had feet of clay. In other words, they were human. How dare they be human? But of course, it turned out to be an invaluable lesson that pushed both of us into claiming our own agency, our own authority, including taking a stand and responsibility for our own decisions about this ministry. It was also a lesson in forgiveness and compassion and a maturing process for us to recognize that we all have our stories, we all have our wounds and our flaws, And again, that only makes us human and provides us with the lessons that we need to grow. And oftentimes as students, our teachers' lessons become ours. They become even new opportunities for us to grow. Now ratchet that experience up a notch to the time I felt betrayed by the Unity movement. How many of you remember that? I spoke many times about it. Which of course is, again, simply people. A movement isn't like an energy of itself. It's made up of people, all with their own baggage and wounds, doing the best that they could. It was yet another tremendous growing opportunity, calling me into prayer and meditation and action, and this time, which was, I think, my primary lesson, without Rory, who had always been the rebel, who it came easy to, and now I had to step into my own rebel nature, if you will. But I had the support of many of you as I shared that journey. I was learning to trust my inner guidance and take a stand for it, while avoiding the ego trap of win-lose, instead committing to the more difficult but more principled win-win resolution. It's all been a part of my journey. I've come to truly accept that while a burning bush is wonderfully inspiring, our call to ministry was one of those, it usually serves as a door that opens to the real and ongoing work of seeking spiritual wisdom and maturity, which for me is what life is all about. In the final scene of the play, Harry sums it all up as he explains to his son Albus Severus Potter, who was named for Albus Dumbledore and Severus Snape, the two most consequential headmasters of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, and the leaders in the fight against the Dark Lord, that he shouldn't feel burdened by their names. He says they were great men with huge flaws. But you know what? Those flaws almost made them greater. And such is the journey of life. Namaste.
Time in our service when we have an opportunity to practice being in the silence. So we begin by quieting our bodies, getting comfortable and relaxing into our seat, quieting our minds, letting go of all of our planning, worrying, organizing, all of the things that our minds are always so busy doing. We just do our best to let go of that for these few moments so that we can get in touch with that place where we can hear that inner voice. So it can help us to get in touch with our center by taking some slow, deep breaths, breathing in through the nose deeply, filling up your lungs, holding it just for a moment at the top, and then slowly releasing, letting go. And one more time, breathing in deeply, feeling that oxygen reach every cell of your body, holding for just a moment, and releasing, letting go. Feeling yourself now relaxing into this present moment. Sometimes we think when we practice meditation that we're supposed to feel some big dramatic thing. And it's really just about the simplicity of the present moment. Feeling our body sitting here, breathing effortlessly. Feeling that peace when we let go of our thinking mind, let go of all our worries and concerns, and just be present in this now moment. It's not dramatic. It's very simple. And this peace that we feel in this place is what we call the presence of God. In our scripture reading from the daily word today, it talked of Jesus rebuking the wind and telling the sea, "Peace, be still." And so we can tell that to the storms of our own inner world right now. Peace, be still. Peace, be still. For it is in this place of stillness that we can become aware of that inner guiding light that's represented by the star that the Magi followed. As we move along our spiritual journey, we learn more and more that that guiding light is not out there in the sky somewhere, but located right within us. It's not our human self or our human knowledge, but the divine within. And so as we prepare to rest for a few moments in silence, I invite you to just imagine that inner light burning brightly. That still small voice, that inner knowing that you can trust and that you can follow, and that will always lead you to your highest good. So as we begin now to prepare to bring this time of prayer and meditation to a close, gently bringing your awareness back to this time and space, we return with a better knowledge of that inner light, a better knowledge of that presence of God that's always available to us. And for this we are grateful, and we say thank you, God. Amen.